Hello, welcome to lesson 1 for the 7th topic of biology called ecology. The lesson title is Abiotic and Biotic Factors. For our learning outcomes today, we are going to list the main abiotic and biotic factors that exist within an ecosystem. For our Aspire outcome, we are going to describe what living organisms in an ecosystem compete for. Okay, to start us off, I would like you to look at the 6 pictures on this slide and try to come up with a single word which can be used to describe all of these pictures. I'm not going to give you any more clues at this stage, but you're looking for one single word which could be used to describe all of these pictures, and I'm going to give you 30 seconds, starting now. Ten seconds remaining. Okay, time's up. Did anybody come up with a word? The word I was looking for that can be used to describe all of these pictures is ecosystem. All of these pictures represent ecosystems from around the world. The first picture shows somebody's back garden, which is an ecosystem. The second picture shows an area of Iceland and the polar bear, which is also an ecosystem. The third picture shows a lake surrounded by woodland, which is an ecosystem. The fourth picture, an area of woodland ecosystem. The fifth picture is an ecosystem at the bottom of the ocean. And the final picture is the ecosystem in the Sahara Desert. So the word ecosystem is absolutely key to understand this lesson today. To give us an official definition for the word ecosystem, an ecosystem is the interaction of a community of living organisms with the non-living parts of their environment. To summarise living organisms, we use the word biotic, and to summarise non-living organisms, we use the word abiotic. If you would like to pause the video now and make a note of that definition, you can do, but you don't have to. Okay, within an ecosystem there are many different factors that affect how easily or how difficult it is for living species to exist there. There are 2 groups of factors which exist within any ecosystem all over the world. Those factors are split into the groups abiotic and biotic. Just to remind you, the word abiotic means non-living. On this slide, I've given you 8 silly pictures, and I've given you the 8 abiotic factors that you need to be aware of. All I want you to do is look at the pictures and match the pictures to one of the abiotic factors that I've listed in the bottom right corner. And I'm going to give you a clue to start you off. Picture 1 represents rain, so you can just write 1 equals rain. I'm going to give you 1 minute to do that, starting now. Ten seconds remaining. Okay, brilliant. How did you get on? The first one was the example I gave you, which represented rain. The second picture shows this cartoon cloud and the wind coming out of the cloud, and I used it to represent wind speed. The third picture shows some canisters with a gauge on the top of O2, which you'll all know is oxygen, so it represents oxygen levels. The fourth one is representing carbon dioxide levels, and a bonus mark if anyone spotted that the number 2 should be written much smaller and underneath the C and the O to correctly represent the formula for carbon dioxide. The fifth picture shows wind direction. It's a weather vane and it's got north, south, east, west on it, which would show the direction the wind is blowing in. The sixth picture represents temperature. The seventh picture is of a pH testing kit, so represented soil pH. And the final picture is a light bulb, so no prizes for guessing, represents light intensity. So those 8 things are the abiotic factors that affect whether species can exist or not within any one of the ecosystems that we started off looking at. Biotic factors also affect the number of living organisms which can survive. I would like you to use the picture clues to see if you can come up with the 4 biotic factors that you need to be aware of. I've tried to make it a little bit fun, but you're looking for 4 biotic factors that would affect the numbers of living organisms that can survive within an ecosystem. And again, I'm going to just give you 1 minute starting now. Ten seconds remaining. Okay, time's up. Okay, the first picture shows these people doing their weekly supermarket shop, and it was there to represent availability of food. The availability of food greatly affects the number of living organisms which can survive in an ecosystem. If individuals can find food, they will survive. If they can't find food, they will die of starvation. So availability of food is one of the biggest biotic factors that influences how many living organisms can survive. The second picture of the tiger with the word new next to it represents new predators. If a new predator comes into an ecosystem and starts to prey upon the smaller animals that other predators relied on for their food source, those other predators will go hungry, they won't have any food available to them, they will starve, and they may even become extinct. So a new predator moving into an area of ecosystem can have devastating impact on other species that already live there. The third clue is actually a diagram that's been used recently in the news to represent the virus for coronavirus. Now obviously coronavirus has had devastating impact this year across the world. The reason why coronavirus has caused such widespread issues worldwide is because it's a new pathogen. It's a viral pathogen that we've not seen before, so therefore we have no vaccination available for coronavirus. Because people haven't been vaccinated against it, they don't have any immunity to the disease, so therefore it's making people very poorly. So new pathogens that exist within ecosystems can have devastating effects and can wipe out large numbers of individuals within that ecosystem. The fourth picture clue shows 4 Olympic athletes running the 100-metre sprint. The green arrow points to the man on the far left who's actually just won that 100-metre sprint race. And this picture clue is probably the hardest one to work out. It represents out-competing, because that man at the arrow is pointing to has out-competed the other men on the picture, because he's actually won the race. And if a species can out-compete another species by either being faster or stronger or able to resist disease, they will survive. The lesser species will not survive, and this can massively affect the numbers of living organisms which can exist within an ecosystem. So just to summarise, we had availability of food, we had new predators, we had new pathogens which can cause diseases, and then we had one species out-competing another. And I've given you another picture here of a tiger and a lion fighting. They are two different species. The weaker species numbers would fall low, so they could no longer breed. They are the 4 biotic factors which affect the number of living organisms which can survive within an ecosystem. Okay, what I would like you to do now is I'd like you to draw this table to summarise the main abiotic and biotic factors. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to draw the table, and then I'm going to blank the slide off, and I'm going to ask you just to check you've got the 6 abiotic factors and the 4 biotic factors. Please don't copy them down. I would like you to see what you can remember. This is going to be really important when you get to your Google form plenary at the end of the lesson, because you're going to need to remember these factors then. So a quick table, just on a piece of paper, on a post-it note, whatever you've got available to you, of abiotic factors and biotic factors. There are 6 abiotic factors and 4 biotic factors. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to see which ones you can remember. Okay, did you get them all? Did you get the 8 for abiotic factors? You should have had wind speed, wind direction, rainfall, pH of the soil, carbon dioxide levels, oxygen levels, light intensity and temperature. And then there's 4 biotic factors. So we had new pathogens which can cause new diseases, new predators which can prey on individuals and alter the balance of the food chains. We had the availability of food, and we had species out competing each other. If you got these, we've now met the challenge outcome for the lesson, which was to list the main abiotic and biotic factors that exist within the ecosystem. Well done. Okay, so we're going to move on now to look at the Aspire outcome, which was about competition. So just to remind us, we are trying to describe what living organisms in an ecosystem compete for. Okay, so I want you to think for a second. There's an area of woodland near your house. And in that area of woodland, these 10 rabbits all live. So you've got the area of woodland shown in the image in the middle, surrounded by these 10 rabbits that would exist there. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to think about the 4 things that these rabbits would compete against each other for. Just 30 seconds. What would all these rabbits be in competition with each other for? Starting now. Ten seconds remaining. Okay, time up. What did you get? So the first thing that any animals would compete for, I imagine you probably got this top of your list, is food. Any animals compete for food. In this area of woodland, it looks like there's plenty of grass. If there was only 10 rabbits, I don't think they would have to compete that hard for the grassland. But if it was winter and that grass was mostly covered in snow or frozen, or if there was 1,000 rabbits instead of 10, they would definitely need to compete a little bit harder for food. Okay, the second thing that animals compete for is water. And again, spring morning, summer's morning, area of woodland such as the one in the picture and 10 rabbits, water would be abundant. So they wouldn't need to compete too hard for it. But if you think about the ecosystem from the start of this lesson, the Sahara Desert, and you think about animals that might exist within the Sahara Desert, they might go days or even weeks without any water. So when they did find water, they would have to compete with each other to access that water if it was in short supply. The third thing these rabbits would compete for is space. And when we're talking about animals, we often refer to that space as territory. Now, these rabbits would have a lot of space within that woodland. They wouldn't be living on top of each other, so I actually don't think they would be competing very fiercely for the space. But they would still want to find space to build their burrows, perhaps to have their babies, and also to call their little bit of that woodland. They would certainly have an area which they preferred to be in to set up their habitat. So animals do compete for space, often referred to as territory. The fourth thing that animals compete for is a mate. Animals all want to be able to find a mate to successfully breed and produce offspring, and then their species does not become extinct. Now, these rabbits would easily be able to find a mate because it doesn't look like there's much else living in that woodland from the picture. But in more endangered species where their numbers across the world are very low, sometimes human interventions and breeding programs do allow those species to meet and to form those bonds so those species do not become extinct. So the four things that animals compete for: food, water, space and a mate. Okay, the same area of woodland now, and I'd like you to think about 10 of the silver birch trees that exist within this woodland. You would have seen silver birch trees when you've been out and about. They're the trees that have almost a white, very grey silver bark that's often got kind of a shiny appearance to it. They're called silver birch trees, and I want you to think about the 10 of them existing in this area of woodland. You can actually see there's a lot more. What would those birch trees compete for? And I'm going to give you a little clue here. I want you to think about what plants have to do that animals don't have to do. What chemical process do plants carry out that animals do not? I'm going to give you 30 seconds. What four things would those silver birch trees compete for? Off you go. Ten seconds remaining. Good job. Okay, did you get them all? Okay, the first thing that I think you would have come up with if you're thinking about plants would have been water. So I'm going to jump to number 2, because you all know if you've ever had a plant in the house or in your garden and we have a red hot spell in summer, we have to water those plants either with a watering can or a hose pipe in order for them to stay alive. So I think water would probably have been top of your list, even though it's the second on mine. The first thing on my list was nutrients from the soil. Plants do compete to get the nutrients they need, such as nitrogen and magnesium, from the soil. If you look at the trees on that picture, they are fairly close together. Their roots will overlap each other and therefore be competing for water and nutrients from the soil. If the soil has lots of nutrients in it, the plants will grow more healthily than if it doesn't have many nutrients in it. One of the reasons why plants can exist for 20 years and then suddenly die can be because the soil is exhausted of nutrients and they're no longer getting the nutrients that they need. The third thing that plants compete for is space. Now this also come up when we were talking about animals, but when we were talking about animals we use the word territory. The reason we use the word territory for animals but not for plants is the plants aren't territorial, they don't move around. So, but they do compete for space. They do need enough space for their roots to grow successfully and grow out wide enough to search for soil and nutrients. And they do need enough space for their leaves to open up and capture the sunlight, which is the fourth thing that these plants are competing for. Now obviously we didn't list light for animals because as animals they either capture their food by hunting or we go out and buy it from a supermarket as humans do. But plants do have to compete for light because they use the process of photosynthesis to capture the light to make glucose, which is the plant's food source. So the four things that plants compete for: nutrients from the soil, water, space and light to allow them to carry out photosynthesis. So to summarise, animals compete for food, water, space and mates. Plants compete for nutrients from the soil, water, space and light for photosynthesis. And just to remember that sometimes the word space for animals is replaced by the word territory, because the animals move about, but they would have a preferred area which they can class as their habitat. Some animals are a lot more territorial than others and actually move about in packs and occupy a very distinct area which would become their territory. For our Aspire outcome then, I would like you to describe what living organisms in an ecosystem compete for. I'm going to give you 1 minute and I would like you to list the 4 things that animals compete for and the 4 things that plants compete for. Off you go. Ten seconds remaining. Okay, did you manage to get all 8? So animals compete for food, water, space, sometimes called territory, and mates. And plants compete for water, nutrients from the soil, light for photosynthesis, and again for space. Well done to those of you who managed to get all 8. Fantastic job. Okay, that's the lesson over for the PowerPoint, but what I would like you to do now is complete the Google form as a plenary to this lesson. Any notes you've made as you go along can be used to help you with this form. You will receive your mark immediately after you submit the form, and good luck. Take care of yourselves. All the best, Mrs. Keenan.